Buddy, it's I. You know me as Matthew, your friendly neighborhood automotive technician. And today I'm making an interesting video for you. Really don't know how to headline it or what to call it. I think we're gonna call it the marks of an honest and good mechanic or automotive technician. And also you'll see here what's the difference in a career automotive technician and what I call a weekend warrior that I respect very much. I do respect weekend warriors, but with 17 years experience every day doing this for a living to feed my family, I am an automotive technician. Okay, so here we are. This is our 2000 Toyota Corolla 1.8 liter engine, and this is the vehicle that we replaced the variable valve timing components on it, exhaust gear, timing chain. We readjusted all the valves on it, and when it first came to us, it was barely running, would barely start, had no power whatsoever. So the first thing we did was pull the codes on it and had random misfire codes and all kinds of funky exhaust codes and stuff like that. You can watch the Toyota diagnosis video on the YouTube channel. And what we found was that we had extremely low compression in cylinders cylinders 2, 3, and 4. I think some of them were as low as 23 pounds. I mean, they were just completely dead. And so what we couldn't decide was if we had an issue with the valve train or if we had an issue with the head gasket. And so some of the signs that we looked for were things like, as far as the head gasket goes, things like oil and smoke, gray or white smoke coming out of the tailpipe, which would be coolant and oil, or blue smoke coming out of the tailpipe, indication that any foreign material or objects were getting into the cylinder, like coolant or oil. Had none of that, honestly, whatsoever. And at the same time, we also did what's a compressed air check into the cylinders. And we did this to see if any valves or anything were open, or if maybe we had a blown head gasket. And what we're looking for was cross-contamination. In other words, if we introduce air into cylinder 4, we're listening for it to come out of cylinder 3 with our intake valve shut. If you notice, our cam lobes here are up, so we know that our intake valves are shut. And if there's cross-contamination, then that's going to tell us that, yes, we do have a weak head gasket and we got an issue. So that's what we did. We ran it through all this in the beginning, and what we found was we really didn't have the right justification to call it a blown head gasket. So what we started doing was then we started measuring all of our valves. At 160,000 miles, we had not known if the buckets had ever been adjusted or changed. And that's something that you have to do on this engine, is you have to adjust the valves on it. And so once we pulled the valve cover off, the first thing we noticed was that our timing chain was extremely loose. It was actually hanging down to here. And so from there we started, doing the math, long story short, and started replacing our buckets and adjusting our valves, because that is where we found that our valves were all too tight, way out of adjustment. And so therefore, even though the cam lobe was up, our valves were still staying open, and we were losing all of our compression. So we replaced everything as far as the valve train and the timing goes, minus the camshafts themselves, and readjusted the buckets, and then went back in to check everything to make sure that we had the proper clearance per the factory specifications. And we put the key in it, and once we put the key in it, we started it, and it started right up. It ran great for us. Normally what I do when I do timing and I end up removing camshafts and the front ends of engines and whatnot, once I'm done with my work and I double and triple check it, what I'll do is I'll let the car idle, honestly, for as long as 3-4 hours sometimes. If that's in increments of like 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 45 minutes here over the course of 2 days, well then that's what we do. And so this vehicle, over the course of a night and a morning, I had allowed to idle for about 3 hours. And at that point, I decided to take it on a 60-mile test drive. And is 60 miles necessary? Not all the time, no. 30 miles is a decent test drive to drive cycle a computer, check engine light, any issues whatsoever. But 60 miles allows me to go to sleep at night and know that I'm covered. So actually, we had 3 hours of idle time and 54.6 miles of test drive time with no issues whatsoever. Return it back to the customer, who then drove it home that night, and then from what I understand got back in it the next morning to drive it around town. And at that point, that's when the check engine light came back on, and it was reported that it started running rough again. Not as rough, but yes, still rough. And we noticed that it was running rough when you did things like turn the AC on, which puts an extra load on the engine anytime you do that. And check engine light comes on, so the customer has it checked, and it comes back as a random misfire code. Oh my gosh. So between the time that he picked it up at 54 miles and the time that he brought it back to my house and dropped it off to be rechecked, there was 110 miles put on the vehicle. So about the difference between 54 and 110, what is that, like 56? Somewhere around there. So the difference of 56 miles somewhere in 56 miles after I had driven it for 54 miles, the engine started to fail again. So I bring it back in, I open the hood up, I compression check it, and sure enough, I've got low compression. Not as low as I had before, but I have low compression in cylinders 3 and 4, and my compression is also low in cylinder 2, and I steadily am losing compression. I went from 120 on down to what was it, like 100, and then I went from there on down to 90. Now I'm at 60 pounds of pressure, and since I've had it here, I've got it to run worse and worse and worse. Oh my gosh, what's going on here? So at that point, we did decide to start looking into the timing train here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it real quick, and I'm going to get set up to show you what we started doing. All right, and we're back. So what did not make sense to us was why after a 60-mile test drive, why after we gave it back to the customer and he drove it, did it decide to start misfiring? First thing we did suspect was an electronic failure, a coil, maybe even a cracked spark plug, something like that. That's not what we found. We checked for that first. At that point, we then pulled the valve cover and we started double checking all of our work, checked to make sure it was in proper timing, all that's good. What we did was we just checked the timing advance per the computer on the number 1 cylinder, and the timing advance is fine. And so the timing is good. So then we, by hand, turn the engine over, and as you saw a second ago, just check to make sure that our valves are closed, and our valves are completely closed. And so at that point, there's really nothing left to check for the head gasket. And the way we do that is we introduce compressed air into our cylinder. Now, normally, you would not want to put your hand down here and hold on to this ratchet, because I'm introducing 100 pounds of compressed air in here, and it's going to turn this engine over. But if that air is going somewhere, well, then it's not going to be as strong. So we're going to hold on to our crank here, and we're going to listen to see if we have cross-contamination in between our cylinders. Okay, so at this point, with our valves completely closed, I am filling the cylinder with compressed air, and I can already hear that there is cross-contamination between cylinder 3 and 4. If I give it just a little, you can see the camshaft wanting to turn, the intake cam there, you see it wants to turn, but I'm able to hold it, and there is definitely air coming out of cylinder 3. And so just to make sure that our valves are closed here and that everything is okay per the valve train, we then removed our intake tubing opened up our throttle, wedged it open with a screwdriver, and listened for any air coming up through the intake just to make sure. And at that point, we had no air coming up through the intake. So at that point, that goes ahead and tells us that yes, within that difference of 56 miles after we delivered it to the customer, the head gasket blew, or is obviously beginning to go out. And we're starting to lose compression now in those cylinders, and obviously we have good justification to go ahead and pull the head and do a head gasket job. Now, this is where there could be a debate on this video, and this is what I think. First of all, just because I work out of my garage in my backyard doesn't mean I'm a grease monkey. Like I said, I've got 17 years experience. I've worked in some pretty high-end shops in my time. And as a matter of fact, there's one of my Corvette customers over there. And so there's a professional standard here, no matter how you're dressed, no matter how you look, no matter what you're doing. And the professional standard is you need to help the customer through these types of experience. And so I think it's best to set the business standard for the automotive repair industry in my community. And first and foremost, tell the customer that you will not be charged for this diagnosis. Although, yes, this is a new problem. And kind of like my customer said when I was talking with them, listen, nobody asked for this issue. I didn't ask for it. It's not my fault. They didn't ask for it. It's not technically their fault. It's just something that we need to get done to get this car running right. And so some shops, they may tell you, well, you need to pay for the diagnosis. You need to pay for a head job. You need to do this. You need to do that. I guess I get it. You have overhead and bills to pay. I guess so. But this is a career to me. This is my life to me. This is my legacy. And so what do? First of all, we don't charge for the diagnosis. Then from there, we go ahead and we ask the customer, please just give us your permission to go ahead and look at the head gasket. If I have to, I'll even eat the cost of the head gasket kit. It's not that expensive to replace if I have to put it back together. And we tell the customer, you know what? Don't worry about money right now. Let's just get to the bottom of it. Let's get it repaired. Let's figure it out. And then we'll sit down and we'll talk about if there's any extra money or anything that needs to be done. Why? Because in order to pull the head off, you have to pull all of this that I've already done. This has to come off anyways. Now, some people may say, well, how come you didn't catch a blown or a faulty head gasket in your first diagnosis? That's because there was no faulty head gasket in the first diagnosis. We had valves that were stuck wide open. And so if you look at it from an engineering standpoint, what it is it's a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If you have 3 weak links and you fix this one, well, then this one's going to go out, and then this one's going to go out, and you're going to need to fix those as well. And so the best thing I think we can do as professional technicians is just walk our customers through this and make sure that we don't make them go to the bank and cash out the family farm. So, well, everybody, thank you, Treasure Valley, Boise, Idaho, for supporting me. Matthew, your friendly neighborhood automotive technician. Thank you for watching. Everybody, have a good day.